Welcome to True Crime Vault, where we investigate some of America's most chilling criminal cases. Today's case takes us to Atlanta, Georgia, where on a quiet Wednesday evening in 2024, Marcus Thompson, a church accountant, was found dead during choir practice at Blessed Life Ministries. What initially appeared to be a tragic medical incident would soon unravel into one of the most shocking cases in Georgia's history, exposing a $47 million criminal enterprise masked behind religious prosperity, professional hitmen, and a powerful megachurch's deadly secrets. The investigation would reveal how one man's pursuit of truth became a death sentence, challenging the very foundations of faith and justice in the American South. On a sweltering Sunday morning in Atlanta, Georgia, the gleaming glass and steel facade of Blessed Life Ministries stretched toward heaven like a modern-day Tower of Babel. The megachurch's vast parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles, Mercedes, BMWs, and Lexus SUVs, a testament to Pastor Michael Whitestone's prosperity gospel message that God rewards the faithful with material wealth. Inside his private office, Pastor Whitestone adjusted his custom-made Italian suit before the morning service. At 52, he cut an impressive figure, tall and distinguished, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight into your soul. A Rolex glinted on his wrist as he reviewed his sermon notes, occasionally glancing at the 4 giant monitors displaying different angles of his 3,000-seat sanctuary. Pastor, the numbers from last week's blessing campaign. Marcus Thompson's voice carried a hint of concern as he entered the office, manila folder in hand. At 45, Marcus was the antithesis of Pastor Whitestone's flashy presence. His modest suits and quiet demeanor made him nearly invisible in the church's hierarchy, despite his crucial role as head accountant. His dark skin and humble bearing meant many congregants assumed he was part of the maintenance staff rather than the man who managed the church's multi-million-dollar finances. "Marcus, my faithful servant," Whitestone's voice boomed with practiced warmth. "Tell me we've exceeded our goals again." He didn't look up from his notes. Marcus cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Actually, sir, I've noticed some discrepancies. The offshore account in the Caymans." Now, Whitestone interrupted, finally looking up with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You know those accounts are for the Lord's work. Expanding our ministry requires creative financial management." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, thinking of his own children, Teresa, 14, and James, 12. He'd raised them alone since their mother's death 5 years ago, working hard to give them opportunities he never had. His position at Blessed Life had helped put them in good schools, but lately, the weight of what he was seeing in the books kept him awake at night. "Sir, the SEC requires." "The SEC?" Whitestone's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Brother Marcus, surely you understand that governmental regulations are worldly concerns. We answer to a higher authority." He stood, placing a manicured hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Your faith seems troubled. Perhaps you should join our executive prayer retreat next weekend. Clear your mind of these worldly worries." The implied threat hung in the air like incense. Marcus thought of the previous church accountant, who had resigned suddenly after raising similar concerns. No one had heard from him since he moved to pursue other opportunities. Through the office windows, they could see the congregation filing in, a sea of Sunday best. The 15,000-member church was a powerful force in Atlanta's religious and political landscape. Many local politicians, judges, and business leaders filled its pews every Sunday. The church's influence extended into every corner of the city's power structure. "We've been blessed to have you with us, Marcus," Whitestone continued, his grip tightening slightly. "You've done so well here. Your children are thriving in their private schools, aren't they? Teresa's college prospects looking good? It would be a shame to jeopardize all that with unnecessary concerns." Marcus felt a cold knot in his stomach. He knew what he'd discovered in the books. Millions in donations diverted through shell companies, luxury purchases disguised as ministry expenses, offshore accounts swelling while the church's promised community programs remained underfunded. The prosperity gospel was indeed enriching someone, but it wasn't the faithful congregants who gave till it hurt. "Of course, Pastor," Marcus replied quietly, tucking the folder back under his arm. "I'll review the numbers again. That's the spirit." Whitestone's warmth returned instantly. "Now, I believe the choir is gathering for pre-service worship. You should join them. You have such a lovely voice for gospel music." Marcus nodded and turned to leave, his mind racing. In his pocket, his phone felt heavy with the encrypted files he'd been gathering for months. Evidence of years of systematic fraud, all meticulously documented. The anonymous email account was already set up. One press of send would deliver everything to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the IRS. But as he walked through the church's opulent lobby, Marcus saw his children in the youth choir, Teresa's voice soaring above the others. They were happy here, safe. The church had become their community after their mother died. Was he ready to risk everything? Their security, their future, perhaps even their safety. For the truth? The massive sanctuary screens lit up with Pastor Whitestone's face as he took the stage, arms raised in benediction. "Welcome, blessed children of God." His voice echoed through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Who's ready to receive their prosperity breakthrough today?" The congregation erupted in applause and amens. Marcus slipped into his usual spot in the choir stands, the manila folder tucked safely away in his office. But the numbers kept flashing through his mind, along with the faces of elderly congregants who gave their Social Security checks to the church, believing God would multiply their sacrifice. He had a choice to make, and either way, he knew it would cost him dearly. The fluorescent lights hummed quietly in Marcus Thompson's basement office at Blessed Life Ministries. It was nearly midnight, long after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. The only sounds were the gentle whir of his computer and the occasional shuffle of papers as he cross-referenced financial documents. His desk was covered with spreadsheets, bank statements, and donation records. 3 computer monitors displayed different accounting software windows, each telling a part of the story he'd spent months piecing together. A half-empty cup of coffee had gone cold beside his keyboard. "Follow the money," he muttered to himself, a habit developed during his 15 years as a CPA. His finger traced a line of numbers across a spreadsheet, stopping at a particular cell that made his frown deepen. The Blessed Children's Community Center project had raised $2.3 million from congregants over the past year. The promotional videos showed architectural renderings of a state-of-the-art facility that would serve underprivileged youth in South Atlanta. Pastor Whitestone had shed tears during his impassioned plea for donations, describing his vision of children being saved from the streets. But the construction site remained an empty lot. Marcus pulled up the corresponding bank records. The donations had indeed been collected, but the money's path afterward was deliberately obscured through a maze of transfers. He traced it through 3 different shell companies before finding its final destination: a private account in the Cayman Islands under the name Kingdom Advancement Initiatives. A separate window showed the pastor's credit card statements, officially listed as ministry expenses. Marcus had categorized the charges: private jet rentals, $180,000; designer clothing, $95,000; luxury car payments, $128,000; high-end restaurants, $42,000; personal wellness retreats, $235,000. The pattern repeated across multiple accounts and projects. The Widow's Blessing Fund, that was supposed to support elderly congregants, had been drained to purchase a vacation home in Barbados. The Youth Ministry Extension Program funds had somehow financed Pastor Whitestone's daughter's wedding at a European castle. Marcus opened a password-protected folder on his encrypted hard drive. Inside were thousands of documents he'd carefully gathered and organized over the past 8 months. Bank statements showing systematic fund diversion, incorporation documents for shell companies, email correspondence about creative accounting, photos of luxury purchases tagged as ministry expenses, records of offshore account transfers, tax documents with deliberately misleading classifications, audio recordings of finance committee meetings, surveillance footage of cash being removed from donation counters. He'd started noticing discrepancies shortly after being promoted to head accountant. At first, they were small things, expense reports that didn't quite add up, donation amounts that changed between collection and deposit. But as he gained access to more of the church's financial structure, a darker pattern emerged. The church's prosperity gospel message wasn't just theological. It was a sophisticated financial scheme. Congregants were convinced that giving money to the church was a seed that God would multiply back to them. The more they gave, the greater their promised return. Many took out loans or emptied retirement accounts to make larger donations, believing their sacrifice would bring divine abundance. Marcus opened another folder containing personal stories he'd documented. Mrs. Johnson, 78, who donated her entire pension after Pastor Whitestone promised God would cure her cancer. The Martinez family, who mortgaged their house to give $50,000 during the double portion campaign. Brother Thomas, who was going through bankruptcy but still tithed faithfully from his unemployment checks. The faces of these faithful members haunted him. They sat in the back of the church in their worn clothes, while Pastor Whitestone preached about prosperity from his golden pulpit. His computer pinged with an incoming email. It was from James Whitestone, the pastor's nephew and church operations director. Marcus, need you to revise Q3 reports before board meeting. Several categories require adjustment per usual procedure. Pastor wants clean numbers for IRS filing. Handle ASAP. Attached were instructions for reclassifying personal expenses as ministry costs and moving certain donations through the Shell Company network. Everything would look legal on paper, backed by carefully crafted documentation. Marcus opened his personal email account and began composing a message to investigative reporters at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He had already created an anonymous account under the name Truthseeker, using a VPN and encrypted browser. But his finger hovered over the send button as he thought about the consequences. The church wasn't just Pastor Whitestone's corrupt empire. It was also a community that many people genuinely depended on. The soup kitchen that fed hundreds weekly. The addiction recovery program that had helped countless members. The youth mentoring that kept kids off the streets. The senior citizens who found purpose in church activities. The sense of belonging it gave to displaced people. Would exposing the corruption destroy these genuine good works? Would the faithful be more hurt by the truth or by continuing deception? His cell phone buzzed. It was a text from Teresa. Dad, don't forget, my choir solo is next Wednesday night. You promised you'd be their heart suit. Marcus looked at the family photo on his desk. His children were thriving in their private schools, making friends, pursuing their dreams. The church had embraced them after their mother's death, providing stability when they needed it most. All of that could vanish if he pressed send. But the numbers on his screen told an undeniable story. The fraud was growing more brazen, with larger amounts being diverted each quarter. How long before it all collapsed anyway, taking even more victims down with it? His finger still hovered over the mouse as the office's motion sensor lights clicked off, leaving him in the dim glow of his computer screens. The numbers stared back at him, raw and damning in their digital clarity. Marcus had always believed that numbers didn't lie, but he'd never expected them to tell such a devastating truth. He reached for his phone to take a picture of a particularly incriminating spreadsheet. As he did, a shadow passed by his office window. He froze, heart pounding, until he convinced himself it was just the security guard making rounds. But it reminded him that he wasn't just dealing with numbers on a screen. There were powerful people behind those numbers, people who had already demonstrated they would go to great lengths to protect their prosperity gospel empire. Marcus began meticulously organizing the evidence into encrypted files, each one a potential torpedo in the gleaming hull of Blessed Life Ministries. The truth was there in the numbers, cold, hard, and irrefutable. The only question was, who would pay the price when those numbers finally spoke? Chapter 3, The Breaking Point / Tithanjang Linjiadan. The Sunday morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of Blessed Life Ministries, casting colorful shadows across Marcus Thompson's face as he sat in the back pew, arrived early before the congregation would flood in. His Bible lay open on his lap, but his eyes were fixed on Pastor Whitestone, who was doing a microphone check on stage. Test, test. Can we get more volume in the monitors? Whitestone's voice boomed through the empty sanctuary. Even in rehearsal, he commanded attention, his $5,000 suit catching the light as he moved. Marcus's hand instinctively went to his breast pocket, where a USB drive containing all the evidence sat like a lead weight. After another sleepless night, he'd made copies of everything, one for the FBI, one for the IRS, one for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and one hidden in a safety deposit box under his sister's name. His phone vibrated. A text from Teresa. "Dad, can we go shopping for my choir robe today? The spring concert is coming up." Before he could reply, another message came through. This one from James. "Got my science fair project into the finals. Mr. Peterson says I might win first place." His children's achievements had always been his pride and joy, but now each success felt like another chain binding him to silence. The private school that nurtured their talents, the choir that gave Teresa confidence, the science lab where James discovered his passion for research, all provided by the church's Educational Ministry Fund. A memory surfaced. His late wife, Sarah, in her hospital bed 5 years ago, making him promise to give their children every opportunity possible. "They're going to change the world, Marcus," she'd said, her voice weak but her eyes fierce with maternal determination. "Promise me they'll get the chance." He'd kept that promise, working his way up from junior accountant to head of finance, carefully building a stable life for his family within the church community. But at what cost? The previous night, he'd driven past Mrs. Johnson's house. The elderly widow who donated her pension was now working as a Walmart greeter to make ends meet. She still came to church every Sunday, praising God for testing her faith, while Pastor Whitestone's wife showed off another diamond ring. His phone buzzed again. An email from James Whitestone. "Marcus, need those adjusted reports by end of day. Pastor's meeting with potential investors tomorrow. Numbers need to be strong. Remember our conversation about discretion." JW. The implied threat was clear. Marcus opened his secure email account, where his draft message to the press sat waiting. He'd written and rewritten it dozens of times. "To whom it may concern, I am writing to expose systematic financial fraud at Blessed Life Ministries, one of Atlanta's largest megachurches. As the church's head accountant, I have documented evidence of $17.3 million in misappropriated donations, multiple shell companies used for money laundering, tax evasion through falsified ministry expenses, predatory financial exploitation of vulnerable congregants, offshore accounts containing diverted church funds." The cursor blinked accusingly. Down the hall, he could hear the youth choir beginning to practice. Teresa's voice soared above the others, pure and clear. She'd inherited her mother's gift for music. Marcus pulled out his notebook, where he'd been keeping a decision journal, trying to reason through his options. Option 1. Stay silent. Pros. Children maintain stability. Position and income secure. Community relationships preserved. Personal safety assured. Cons. Complicit in ongoing fraud. More victims will be hurt. Living with guilt. Teaching children wrong values. Option 2. Internal resolution. Pros. Potential for quiet reform. Maintains church stability. Less personal risk. Gradual changes possible. Cons. Likely to be ignored/silenced. Evidence could be destroyed. Fraud continues meanwhile. Previous attempts failed. Option 3. Full exposure. Pros. Complete transparency. Justice for victims. Personal integrity. Systemic change possible. Cons. Personal/family consequences. Community disruption. Possible legal retaliation. Children's lives upended. He closed the notebook as footsteps approached. Deacon Williams, one of Pastor Whitestone's most loyal supporters, sat down beside him. "Brother Marcus, early for service today. Just seeking some quiet time," Marcus replied carefully. "Heard you've been working late a lot. Everything all right with the books?" The question seemed casual, but Marcus caught the sharp look in the deacon's eyes. How many people were watching him? How many suspected what he knew? "Just being thorough," he answered. It's been a blessed year for the ministry. Indeed it has. The deacon's hand clasped his shoulder firmly. Pastor was just saying what a blessing you've been. Shame if anything changed that. After the deacon left, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the family photo album. Pictures scrolled past. Teresa's choir performances, James's science competitions, family game nights, church picnics, Christmas plays. A life carefully built over years. But other images haunted him. Elderly congregants giving their last dollars, single mothers working multiple jobs to maintain their tithes, desperate people taking out loans to sow their seed of faith. His wife's voice echoed in his memory. They're going to change the world, Marcus. But what kind of world would it be if good people stayed silent in the face of evil? What legacy would he really be leaving his children? Marcus stood up, legs slightly shaky, and walked to his office. The early morning light was just beginning to illuminate the space as he booted up his computer. His hands moved steadily now, despite the weight of what he was about to do. He opened his encrypted email account and began to type. To the editorial board, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I am writing to you because the truth can no longer remain hidden. Outside his office, the church was coming alive with Sunday morning activity. The praise team was warming up, their music floating down the hallway. Ushers were taking their positions, ready to welcome the faithful. Everything seemed normal, peaceful. But in a few hours, Marcus knew nothing would ever be the same. His finger hovered over the send button one last time. In his mind, he saw his children's faces, his wife's hopeful eyes, Mrs. Johnson's tired smile, the desperate faces of congregants believing in false promises. The truth shall set you free, he whispered, and clicked send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, its digital payload racing toward a destination that would change everything. Marcus sat back in his chair, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier. He picked up his phone to text his children. They needed to talk before Wednesday's choir practice. Before the storm he'd just unleashed would break over all their heads. I love you both, he typed. Never forget that everything I do is for you. Then he began methodically deleting files, clearing caches, and removing traces of his investigation. The evidence was already safely copied and distributed. Now he just had to survive the fallout. The church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to worship. Marcus straightened his tie and prepared to face another Sunday service, perhaps his last at Blessed Life Ministries. He'd chosen his path, now he would have to walk it, wherever it led. Little did he know, he had less than 4 days left to live. Monday morning arrived with the quiet buzz of digital notifications across Atlanta. At 6 a.m. sharp, encrypted emails landed simultaneously in multiple inboxes. Sarah Chun, investigative reporter, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Timothy Walsh, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Rebecca Martinez, State Attorney General's Office. Jason Kim, Securities and Exchange Commission. Each recipient found a meticulously organized digital package. Folder 1. Financial records. Bank statements, 2019 to 2024. Wire transfer logs. Credit card statements. Offshore account details. Shell company documentation. Folder 2. Internal communications. Email threads. Meeting minutes. Voice recordings. Text message screenshots. Internal memos. Folder 3. Victim statements. Personal testimonies. Financial impact reports. Loan documents. Bankruptcy filings. Medical bills. Folder 4. Supporting evidence. Surveillance footage. Photographic evidence. Property records. Tax filings. Luxury purchase receipts. At the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Sarah Chun spilled her coffee as she scrolled through the files. 15 years of investigative journalism had taught her to recognize a bombshell when she saw one. She immediately called her editor. Tom, clear my schedule. This is bigger than the mayoral corruption case. Across town, Special Agent Rodriguez was already assembling his team. The evidence was comprehensive enough to warrant immediate action, but they needed to move carefully. Megachurches had powerful friends. By 8 a.m., Pastor Whitestone was in his office, preparing for a board meeting, unaware of the digital tsunami about to break. His phone buzzed with a text from his nephew, James. "Uncle Mike, something's wrong. Getting calls from reporters. Check your email." The pastor's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly as he opened his inbox. 3 interview requests from local news stations, 1 from CNN, 2 from national newspapers, all asking about financial irregularities. "Get Marcus Thompson in here, now." But Marcus was already in motion. He'd arrived early before sunrise to clean out his office. Family photos, personal items, and his spare Bible were carefully packed in a cardboard box. He'd left only one item on his desk, a USB drive containing backup copies of everything he'd sent out. His phone had been ringing since 7 a.m. 6 missed calls from James Whitestone, 4 from Pastor Whitestone, 3 from the church's lawyer, 2 from Deacon Williams. He silenced it and drove to his bank, where he emptied his accounts and closed them. Next stop, his children's schools. He signed both Teresa and James out for a family emergency. By 9 a.m., the story was breaking across multiple platforms. Atlanta Journal-Constitution homepage, exclusive megachurch financial scandal, millions in donations misappropriated. Local news breaking alert, Blessed Life Ministries under federal investigation. Twitter was already trending. Hashtag Blessed Life Scandal, hashtag Prosperity Gospel Scam, hashtag Church Fraud, hashtag Whitestone Gate. At FBI headquarters, Agent Rodriguez's team was mapping the evidence. The money trail is sophisticated, his forensic accountant noted. Multiple layers of shell companies, offshore accounts, property holdings under various names. But it's all here, documented, dated, verified. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division had already greenlit a full audit. The SEC was preparing subpoenas. The Attorney General's office was drafting search warrants. Back at Blessed Life Ministries, chaos erupted. Pastor Whitestone called an emergency meeting with his inner circle in the executive conference room. James Whitestone, Operations Director, William Hayes, Church Attorney, Deacon Robert Williams, Gregory Phillips, PR Director, Thomas Morgan, Security Chief. "Find Thompson," Whitestone ordered, his usual smooth demeanor cracking. "Get those files back. Contain this." But it was already too late. By 10 a.m., the story had gone national. CNN, breaking news, Atlanta megachurch accused of $17.3 million fraud. Fox News, Prosperity Gospel Church under federal investigation. MSNBC, church financial scandal rocks Atlanta. Social media exploded with reactions. At Church Watchdog, thread, breaking down the hashtag Blessed Life scandal evidence. At Religion Reporter, sources confirm FBI involvement in hashtag Whitestone Gate. At Financial Crimes, this could be the biggest church fraud case since. Church members began calling and texting each other. The private Facebook group for congregants lit up with questions, denials, and debates. Longtime members defended Pastor Whitestone while others demanded answers. Marcus watched it unfold from a hotel room across town, where he'd taken his children. Teresa and James sat on the bed, confused and scared, as their father tried to explain. "Sometimes doing the right thing has a cost," he told them. "But we have to stand for truth, no matter what." His phone kept buzzing with messages from unknown numbers. Some supportive, others threatening. "Thank you for exposing the truth. You're dead for what you did. God bless you for your courage. Watch your back, snitch." By noon, the church's PR team attempted damage control. Gregory Phillips held a press conference on the church steps. Blessed Life Ministries categorically denies all allegations of financial impropriety. These claims are baseless and appear to be the work of a disgruntled employee. "We maintain complete financial transparency and welcome any investigation." But the evidence was already spreading faster than they could contain it. Social media users were combing through years of Pastor Whitestone's Instagram posts, private jet photos, luxury vacations, designer clothes. Martinez interviewed the remaining witnesses, starting with Sister Matthews, who had arrived just after the incident. "Something was different about tonight's practice," Matthews said, twisting her handkerchief. "James Whitestone leading instead of me. I've been choir director for 12 years. But suddenly today they didn't need me." Next was Brother Johnson, who sat near Thompson. "I saw two men I didn't recognize come in through the side door. Thought it was strange. We never used that entrance during practice." Each witness added another piece: the unusual number of absences, James Whitestone's suspicious phone calls, the quick disappearance of the unknown men, the immediate attempt to control the narrative. At 9:30 p.m., FBI Special Agent Rodriguez arrived with his team. The case was now officially a joint investigation, given Thompson's role as a federal witness. "We need to move fast," Rodriguez said during the initial briefing. "Thompson's evidence implicated powerful people. This feels professional." Martinez agreed. The crime scene was too clean, the timing too perfect. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was a calculated hit disguised as a medical emergency. The investigation expanded outward. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses, cell phone tower data, church entry logs, parking lot security cameras, traffic camera footage. By midnight, they had assembled a preliminary timeline. 6:30 p.m., choir members begin arriving. 6:45 p.m., James Whitestone starts practice. 7:05 p.m., security cameras malfunction. 7:08 p.m., two unknown men enter side door. 7:15 p.m., Thompson's estimated time of death. 7:25 p.m., cameras resume functioning. 7:30 p.m., 911 call placed. 7:42 p.m., death pronounced. Dr. Chen's preliminary findings supported the murder theory. The ligature marks suggest a thin cord or wire, professionally applied. The angle and depth indicate someone trained in this method. This wasn't random. Your killer knew exactly what they were doing. Martinez turned her attention to Thompson's personal effects. His phone contained recent texts showing he feared for his safety. "Watch your back at practice. Unknown number, you should have kept quiet. Blocked caller, God's judgment comes swiftly. Unknown number." In Thompson's car, they found more evidence. A sealed envelope addressed to his sister, a recently updated will, letters to his children, additional USB drives hidden under the seat. He knew, Martinez realized. He knew they were coming for him, but he came anyway, for his daughter's solo. The forensics team found traces of evidence the killers had missed. Partial fingerprints on the door handle, carpet fibers caught on a choir riser, a single drop of sweat possibly from the struggle, microscopic metal fragments from the garrote wire. At 2 a.m., Martinez interviewed James Whitestone in the presence of his lawyer. "Where were you when Mr. Thompson collapsed?" "At the piano, leading practice." "And the security camera malfunction?" "Pure coincidence. Our system is old." "The two unknown men?" "I didn't notice any strangers." Each answer was careful, rehearsed. Whitestone maintained perfect composure, but his right hand tapped steadily on his knee, a tell Martinez had seen in guilty suspects before. The church's PR team was already working to shape the narrative. Tragic natural death at Blessed Life Ministries. Whistleblower succumbs to stress. Church mourns devoted member. But evidence was mounting. Cell tower data showed unusual activity. Traffic cameras caught a suspicious vehicle. Witness descriptions of the unknown men. Thompson's documented fears. The precisely timed camera malfunction. By dawn, Martinez had assembled her initial report. Victim: Marcus Thompson, AGE, 45, occupation. Church accountant, cause of death. Suspected homicide by strangulation motive. Silencing of federal witness suspects. Unknown professional killers, persons of interest. James Whitestone, Pastor Michael Whitestone. Church security personnel. Two unidentified males. The sun was rising over Atlanta as Martinez left the church, casting long shadows across the crime scene tape. News crews were already gathering for morning broadcasts. The story was spreading, Whistleblower found dead. Church scandal turns deadly. FBI investigates possible murder. Sarah Chun from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was waiting by Martinez's car. Detective sources say Thompson sent out evidence packages just before his death. Any comment? This is an active investigation, Martinez replied, but she made a mental note to check Thompson's email records. Back at the station, Martinez stared at her case board. Photos of the crime scene, witness statements, timeline details, evidence logs, person of interest profiles. The pieces were there, but connecting them would take time. Time they might not have if the killers were as professional as they appeared. She picked up a photo of Thompson with his children, taken at last year's church picnic. They were smiling, unaware of the dark currents flowing beneath their church's pristine surface. "We'll find them," she promised the photo quietly. "Whatever it takes." But even as she said it, Martinez knew this case would be different. The combination of religious power, financial crime, and professional killers meant they weren't just fighting criminals. They were fighting an entire system designed to protect itself. Her phone buzzed. The lab had found something on Thompson's USB drive. Maybe this was the break they needed. But as she headed to the forensics department, Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger and darker investigation. Friday morning, 48 hours after Marcus Thompson's death, the FBI's Atlanta field office was alive with activity. Special Agent Rodriguez had commandeered the largest conference room, its walls now covered with evidence boards, timelines, and photographs. Detective Martinez sat at the table, reviewing Dr. Chen's final autopsy report. Cause of death: asphyxiation by ligature strangulation. Time of death: 7:15 p.m. plus or minus 5 minutes. Notable findings: professional-grade wire ligature marks, minimal defensive wounds suggesting trained assailants, traces of an unidentified sedative in bloodstream, evidence of premeditation in method and execution. The tox screen came back, Dr. Chun explained, pointing to specific data. The sedative was administered somehow before the strangulation, probably to weaken his resistance without being immediately noticeable. This wasn't just professional, it was choreographed. The financial investigation team had set up in an adjacent room, sifting through the evidence Thompson had compiled. Offshore accounts: Cayman Islands, $8.2 million. Swiss accounts, $4.7 million. Singapore holdings, $3.1 million. Shell companies: Kingdom Advancement Initiatives LLC, Blessed Ventures Corporation, Grace Holdings International, Divine Purpose Enterprises. Property assets: 6 luxury homes, 3 private jets, multiple high-end vehicles, a yacht registered in Panama. The church's financial structure was like an onion, FBI forensic accountant Lisa Wong reported. Each layer we peel reveals another complex network of transactions. Thompson didn't just find fraud. He uncovered an entire shadow financial empire. Meanwhile, the digital forensics team was analyzing Thompson's devices. His final USB drive, recovered during the autopsy, contained an encrypted folder labeled Insurance, email drafts. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. Below is everything they didn't want found. Audio recordings, finance committee meetings discussing money laundering, private conversations about silencing questions, phone calls threatening other staff members, surveillance footage, cash being removed from donation counters, late-night meetings with suspicious individuals, security camera feeds showing evidence destruction. Detective Martinez focused on the 2 unknown men from the choir practice. Traffic cameras had caught their vehicle, a black Suburban with tinted windows, but the plates were sophisticated fakes that changed displays electronically. Professional hit men, Rodriguez concluded, probably contracted through multiple layers of cutouts to maintain deniability. The investigation had expanded to include FBI Financial Crimes Unit, IRS Criminal Investigation Division, SEC Enforcement Division, State Attorney General's Office, Atlanta Police Department, Forensic Accounting Teams, Digital Crime Specialists, pattern was emerging. Thompson wasn't the first person connected to Blessed Life Ministries to die under suspicious circumstances. 2019, former bookkeeper died in car accident 2020. Investigative journalist found dead of overdose 2021. Deacon who questioned finances had heart attack 2022. Youth pastor who discovered irregularities committed suicide. They've been cleaning house for years, Martinez realized. Thompson was just the latest threat they needed to eliminate. The FBI surveillance team reported unusual activity at the church. Late-night document shredding, hard drives being removed, unusual visitor patterns, frequent private security sweeps, emergency board meetings. Pastor Whitestone maintained his public schedule, appearing calm and in control. Sunday service was particularly well attended, with his sermon focusing on persecution and standing firm in faith. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling. James Whitestone was caught on wiretap. We need to contain this. Yes, the usual channels. No, we can't risk another incident so soon. Let the lawyers handle it for now. The investigation uncovered a complex network of relationships, political connections protecting the church, law enforcement officials on the payroll, media contacts suppressing stories, financial institutions turning blind eye, professional fixers on retainer. Martinez interviewed Thompson's children at their aunt's house, now under federal protection. Teresa, 14 dad, was different the last few weeks, scared but determined. He kept telling us to remember what's right matters more than what's safe. James, 12, he made recordings of everything, said truth needs witnesses. That night he hugged us extra long before choir practice. The children's testimony led to a hidden safe deposit box containing more evidence, additional financial documents, names of other witnesses, dates and locations of suspicious meetings, photos of church leaders with known criminals. The FBI lab analyzed the garrote used to kill Thompson, professional-grade titanium wire, microscopic tool marks matching known hit team signatures, custom handle design used by specific contractor groups, traces of the same wire found in previous accidents. This connects to something bigger, Rodriguez said during the task force briefing. The level of sophistication, the resources involved. This isn't just one church's corruption. Investigation into the church's partners revealed connections to international money laundering operations, organized crime syndicates, political corruption schemes, large-scale tax evasion networks. The media pressure was intense. Sarah Chen's latest article in the AJC connected more dots. Sources close to the investigation suggest Thompson's murder may be linked to a larger pattern of suspicious deaths among church whistleblowers nationally. The prosperity gospel movement, which promises material rewards for donations, has faced increasing scrutiny for potential financial crimes. Pastor Whitestone's carefully crafted image began showing cracks. Security footage caught him in an unguarded moment, raging at his staff. "Find every copy of everything. I don't care what it takes. This ends now." The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit provided a profile. Subject displays classic signs of malignant narcissism combined with religious manipulation expertise. High intelligence, zero empathy, skilled at maintaining public facade while orchestrating violence. Financial tracking revealed money movements immediately after Thompson's death. Large wire transfers to offshore accounts. Property titles being transferred. Emergency fund liquidation. New shell companies formed. Suspicious cash withdrawals. Martinez and Rodriguez worked late into the night, connecting evidence threads. 1. Thompson discovers financial crimes. 2. He gathers evidence methodically. 3. Church leaders discover his investigation. 4. Professional hit team contracted. 5. Murder disguised as natural death. 6. Cover-up operation launched. But questions remained. Who coordinated the hit team? Where did the money trail end? How many others were involved? What evidence was still hidden? Who would be targeted next? The next morning brought a breakthrough. A church janitor came forward. "I saw them that night. The 2 men. They came through the maintenance entrance. Had keys. Someone inside had to let them in. Security card logs confirmed it. Only someone with high-level access could have provided entry. The circle of suspects was narrowing. Martinez stared at the evidence board, seeing patterns emerge. Money flows, power structures, death patterns, protection networks, evidence trails. Thompson's last words to his children echoed in her mind. Truth needs witnesses. He had been one. His death was meant to silence him, but instead, it had launched an investigation that was uncovering decades of crimes hidden behind religious respectability. "We're getting closer," Rodriguez said, adding another photo to the board. Thompson gave his life to expose this. We owe it to him to finish what he started. But in the shadows of power and wealth, others were watching. The same forces that had silenced Thompson were preparing new defenses, new distractions, new ways to maintain their prosperity gospel empire. The investigation was entering deeper waters, where truth and justice faced their greatest tests, and where more lives might be at stake in the pursuit of long-hidden secrets. 1 week after Marcus Thompson's death, Atlanta was a city divided. The morning headlines told the story: Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Race and Religion, the Blessed Life Ministry Controversy. Atlanta Daily World, historic black newspaper, black whistleblower silenced. A modern lynching? Conservative Herald, urban church under attack, liberal media agenda exposed. The racial dynamics of the case had become impossible to ignore. Outside Blessed Life Ministries, 2 groups of protesters faced each other across the church's manicured lawn. On one side, Black Lives Matter activists, civil rights organizations, social justice advocates, former church members, community leaders. On the other, church supporters, conservative religious groups, white evangelical organizations, local business owners, political conservatives. Between them stood a line of police officers, trying to maintain peace as tensions rose under the hot Georgia sun. Reverend James Jackson, a prominent civil rights leader, addressed the media. Marcus Thompson was a modern-day martyr, a black man who dared to expose corruption in a white-led institution and paid with his life. This isn't just about financial crimes. It's about the ongoing racial power dynamics in our religious institutions. Pastor Whitestone's supporters had their own perspective, voiced by Deacon Robert Williams. This is a spiritual attack on our church. The media is trying to make this about race when it's about faith. Brother Marcus's death was a tragedy, but these accusations are dividing our community. Inside the FBI command center, Detective Martinez and Agent Rodriguez watched the protests unfold on multiple screens. The case had become a powder keg of racial tensions. Demographic analysis of Blessed Life Ministries. Leadership, 92% white. Congregation, 65% black. Financial officers, 85% white. Support staff, 78% black. Major donors, 89% white. The numbers tell their own story, Martinez observed. Thompson wasn't just an accountant who found fraud. He was a black man who threatened a white power structure. The investigation had uncovered troubling patterns: selective enforcement of financial rules, discrimination in leadership promotion, disparate treatment of donors, racial profiling in security practices, segregated social networks. Email evidence from church leadership revealed coded language, need to maintain traditional church culture, certain elements becoming too influential, important to preserve established authority. Some people don't understand their proper place. Sarah Chen's latest article exposed more. Internal documents show systematic discrimination in Blessed Life Ministries operations. Black staff members were routinely passed over for promotion, while white employees with less experience were fast-tracked to leadership positions. Marcus Thompson's rise to head accountant was a rare exception, and possibly his fatal mistake. The church's attempts to control the narrative backfired when security footage leaked showing Pastor Whitestone in an unguarded moment. These people need to remember who built this church, who pays the bills, who really matters here. The racial divide deepened as more church members spoke out. Mrs. Johnson, Black, 78, "I gave my pension to the church because pastor said God would multiply it. Now I find out it went to his vacation home. We trusted them, and they saw us as nothing but ATMs." Brother Thomas, Black, 45, "Every time a black person got too close to the real power in the church, something happened to them. Marcus wasn't the first, just the most obvious." Sister Matthews, Black, 62, "They used our voices in the choir, our bodies in the pews, our money in the collection plate. But real power? That was always white only." Deacon Phillips, White, 55, "This is a godly church being attacked by people with an agenda. Race has nothing to do with it. We're all one in Christ." The investigation uncovered a pattern of selective targeting. Black employees more likely to be audited. Black vendors routinely underpaid. Black staff given heavier workloads. Black complaints systematically ignored. Black witnesses more aggressively discredited. Thompson's personal notes revealed his awareness. "They let me see the books because they never thought I'd speak up. A black man in their world should be grateful for the opportunity. Accept the scraps. Know his place. But truth doesn't have a color." The city's black religious community rallied. Prayer vigils for Thompson's family. Support funds for black church workers. Legal aid for potential witnesses. Protection for other whistleblowers. Community organizing meetings. But the white evangelical establishment pushed back. Public statements supporting Whitestone, media campaigns questioning motives, political pressure on investigators, character assassination attempts, financial pressure on opponents. The controversy spread to national media. CNN, race, religion, and murder. The Blessed Life Ministry scandal, Fox News. Church under siege. The war on traditional faith, MSNBC. Systemic racism in Prosperity Gospel Movement, CBN. Christian values under attack in Atlanta. Social media exploded with competing hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Marcus, hashtag Stand with Blessed Life, hashtag Black Churches Matter, hashtag Defend the Faith, hashtag Racism in Religion. The investigation team had to navigate carefully. Agent Rodriguez, "We can't ignore the racial aspects, but we can't let them overshadow the core crimes either. Thompson's murder and the financial fraud are our primary focus." Detective Martinez, "But the racial dynamics might be key to understanding how they got away with it for so long. Who they thought they could victimize, who they thought would stay quiet. The evidence supported this intersection. Financial crimes targeting black congregants. Witness intimidation focused on black staff. Cover-ups exploiting racial power dynamics. Murder investigation hampered by racial bias. Media coverage influenced by racial perspectives. Thompson's children watched the controversy grow from their safe house. Teresa, 14, "Dad always said truth is truth, no matter who speaks it. But some people can't hear truth from someone who looks like us." James, 12, "At school, they taught us about MLK and civil rights. Dad said sometimes standing up for right means standing alone." The investigation uncovered more victims. Black families who lost homes to church schemes. Black employees fired for asking questions. Black vendors forced into unfair contracts. Black witnesses pressured into silence. Black critics systematically discredited. Local black churches began their own investigation, collecting member testimonies, documenting discrimination patterns, gathering financial evidence, supporting potential witnesses, protecting vulnerable members. The racial tension reached into the investigation itself. Questions about investigator bias, pressure from political interests, media scrutiny of racial angles, community trust issues, internal department conflicts. Martinez and Rodriguez maintained focus. Thompson was killed because he had evidence of crimes. His race made him vulnerable to their system, but it's the system itself we need to expose. As protests continued outside Blessed Life Ministries, the investigation pushed deeper. The truth was revealing not just financial crimes and murder, but a deep-rooted system of racial exploitation hidden behind religious respectability. Thompson's last recorded words seemed prophetic. They think being black makes me weak, but it makes me strong. Strong enough to speak truth to power, no matter the cost. The cost had been his life, but as racial tensions exposed long-hidden truths, his death was becoming a catalyst for change that went far beyond one church's scandal. 2 weeks after Marcus Thompson's murder, a thunderstorm rolled over Atlanta, its dark clouds matching the mood inside the FBI's command center. Detective Martinez sat at her desk, reviewing a new piece of evidence that had just arrived. An anonymous package containing a single USB drive. The label read simply, "For Marcus." Digital forensics confirmed its authenticity. Security footage from a hidden camera Thompson had placed in his own office the day before his death. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m., just hours before his final choir practice. The footage showed James Whitestone and 2 men in suits. James, it has to look natural. No mistakes. Suit number 1. Our specialists are very good at what they do. James, the choir practice gives us perfect cover. Just make sure the cameras are down. Suit number 2. Already handled. Payment confirmed offshore. James, half now, half after. Uncle Michael insists on clean resolution. Martinez called Agent Rodriguez immediately. We've got them. Direct evidence of premeditation.